Waiver wire pickups have been extremely important in fantasy football this year. And today, as we head into week 8, I'm giving you my top 10 must add waiver wires for the week. Guys who have impressed, and I believe that you should add to your roster. So, before we get into my top 10, I just want to quickly mention some names that should already be rostered. These guys would have made my top 10, but I'm assuming in most 12-mans that these guys are already rostered. But I would prioritize them. Kyler Murray, I think he's going to be coming off of the IR either next week or the week after, but with how difficult it has been to find a good quarterback this year, he should be rostered. JSN after a breakout game, we love him. Elijah Moore, it's going to get better. The targets are there. Romeo Dobbs, we'll talk about another one of his teammates here soon, but with Christian Watson's potential injury, he should be rostered. Kareem Hunt and Gus Edwards, both playing very important roles. Specifically for Kareem Hunt, we did see that Jerome Ford went down with an injury. At the time of recording, I don't know how serious that injury is, but regardless, Kareem Hunt has a role, and with how difficult it is to find valuable fantasy running backs, Kareem Hunt should definitely be rostered. Okay, straight into the top 10 here. My number one priority, and I think there's a lot of room for, differences of opinion here. I think it's a very fluid top 5 ads this week. But my number one pickup of the week would be Darrell Henderson Jr. of the Los Angeles Rams. Now, he's available in 94% of ESPN leagues and 66% of sleeper leagues. Those sleeper leagues might have been a little bit more sharper heading into the week as they heard that news from Sean McVay. But here's why they're worth adding. Firstly, we know that Kyron Williams and Ronnie Rivers are both on IR. They're going to miss at least the next 3 games, if not more. We also know that Darrell Henderson got the most opportunities of any running back in this backfield. Throughout the week, we weren't sure, was it going to be Zach Evans, maybe Darrell Henderson, Royce Freeman, maybe even Myles Gaskin. We got some clarity before the game that it was going to be Darrell Henderson, and Sean McVay kind of followed through on that promise. Darrell saw 20 total touches, including 2 targets through the air. Meanwhile, Royce Freeman had 12 attempts on the ground. If you look at their snap percentages, Darrell Henderson played 57% of the snaps, while Royce played 43%. So he was the preferred option. He played 10 more snaps than Royce. He ran more routes. He had more targets, and he had 6 more carries. Now, Royce is still worth picking up if you can't get Darrell Henderson, but I just wanted to talk about both of these guys here as the number one pickup. Obviously, I prefer Darrell Henderson. He looks like the guy, and I'm going to say Royce Freeman is an honorable mention, but he's not a top 5 guy for me either. If you're picking up Darrell Henderson, I'd be looking to spend about 25 to 35% of my fab. Look, if you are very desperate to find a starting running back in the next 3 weeks, you're dealing with injuries, you got bye weeks coming up, not this week, but the week after, and you really want to secure yourself, then maybe you'll spend more than 25 to 35%. That's all going to depend on your needs as a team, but definitely Darrell Henderson is worth rostering. He played most of the early and third downs last week. He was also the only back who played in the 2-minute drill, so he is the one to add, in my humble opinion. All right, the second player that is definitely worth an add. He looked fantastic, and he's looked great for most of the year. That is Josh Downs, wide receiver of the Indianapolis Colts. He's available in 65% of ESPN leagues and 48% of sleeper leagues, so he might be out there in some of your leagues still. If he is, absolutely grab him. The reason he's not number one for me is because I believe it's much easier to find a startable wide receiver than it is to find a startable running back. So again, if running back is your need, look towards some of these running backs I'm going to talk about today. If you're set at running back, maybe go ahead and add Josh Downs if you need a solid flex option. Now, Josh Downs has been pretty good for most of the year. We've seen in games where Gardner Minshew has started, he has averaged 8.6 targets per game. It's not been that good with Anthony Richardson, but Anthony Richardson is out for the rest of the year. It'll be Gardner Minshew rest of the way, and we have seen a lot of success with this Gardner and Josh Downs combination, so much so that here in week 7 that we just had, Josh Downs put up a career high in fantasy points, 23.5 PPR points, 125 yards, and he found the end zone on a long bomb touchdown. Josh Downs this week played 50 snaps, ran 25 routes, and was targeted 6 times. It looks like he is their feature slot wide receiver, and it looks like Gardner Minshew is going to favorite him whenever he's on the field. Now, he's not going to play in 2 wide receiver sets when Alec Pierce is healthy, but in 3 wide receiver sets, he'll be a feature. He's when I'm looking at adding him, again, similar to the guys I just talked about, 25 to 35% of my fab is what I'm willing to spend. Now, of course, if you are in a position where you don't need a flex, you don't need a wide receiver, then maybe this isn't the right target for you. All right, the third player that I am looking to pick up, and again, if you are needing running back help, you could prioritize these next 2 guys over Josh Downs. It depends on your team needs. But the number 3 pickup for me this week is D'Onta Foreman. We'll talk about him quickly because I think in sharper leagues, he's already going to be rostered, but he's available in 57% of ESPN leagues still, so I had to mention him, and just 36% of sleeper leagues. Sleeper leagues kind of ahead of the trend typically, but here in week 7, he had 16 attempts on the ground, and he had 5 targets, ending with 33 fantasy points. Remember, last year for the Panthers, we saw D'Onta Foreman go off for a couple of games. Now, it's important to note there was no Rashawn Johnson in this game. He was out with the concussion. Now, it's my belief after watching this game that D'Onta Foreman is not going to be a non-factor when Rashawn Johnson is healthy. What I believe will happen is Rashawn Johnson will take the Darrington Evans role, and D'Onta Foreman will kind of keep that bruiser role type of workload. Let's look at week 7 in the snap count. You can see Darrington Evans had 1 more snap, 34 to 33. You can see routes run, D'Onta and Darrington Evans right by each other. D'Onta had more targets, and D'Onta had more carries. So it will still be a split backfield. Foreman only played 47% of the snaps. Darrington played 48%. It's going to be split when Rashawn is back. But I think Rashawn is already going to be rostered in a high percentage of leagues. If Deontay's out there and you need a RB2 that you're kind of desperate with, you're tough, your RB room is looking tough, go ahead and pick up D'Onta Foreman. He dominated the early down, the goal line, and the short yardage work in that game. And those are the important snaps when it comes to fantasy success. So I would be willing to spend about 25 to 30% of my fab on him as well. Now, the number 4th option is actually a guy that you could make an argument is maybe the second best pickup. Again, depends on what you're looking for. Now, Amari DeMarcado is my number 4 pickup. The reason he's not higher is because we know that James Conner is already 2 weeks into his IR. So there's a chance that you're only getting Amari DeMarcado as a 2-week starter. That's something that we should be slightly concerned about. But at the moment, he's available in 83% of ESPN leagues and 81% of sleeper leagues. All the people out there who went up and picked Amari DeMarcado a week ago, then they dropped him after, it was Keontae Ingram, and now he has a really good game, well, relatively speaking, while he's been dropped from most people's teams. In week 7, Amari DeMarcado was the definition of a workhorse in this game. He saw 53 of 66 snaps. He played 80% of the snaps. That is like Josh Jacobs type usage. That's insane. He ran 28 routes, he caught 5 targets, and he carried the ball 13 times. His counterpart, which was Damian Williams, only carried the ball 1 time and didn't have a single target. From what we've seen last week, when James Conner is out, it looks like they're going to give DeMarcado a very big part of this backfield. Now, keep in mind, he was getting the vast majority of the early down work, the third down work, the 2-minute drill, and even short yardage usage. DeMarcado was a definition of a workhorse in this game with purely volume. Now, if you're looking at fab, I'm willing to spend about 25% of my fab on him, 25 to 30%. But again, keep in mind, when James Conner is back, DeMarcado probably goes back into the realm of irrelevancy completely. So you have to keep that in mind. D'Onta Foreman has a chance to be relevant, maybe a little bit longer. Same with Darrell Henderson. So keep those things in mind when you're looking at the waiver wire this week. What's more important to you? A more reliable starter in the next 2 weeks or someone that has a little bit more longevity. All right, the 5th player that I'm looking to add, this is a player that I've talked about on my stash video last week. If he's not picked up enough, I might talk about him again. But in the waiver wire video this week, why don't you go ahead and pick up Devin Singletary? He's currently available in 74% of ESPN leagues and 79% of sleeper leagues. Now, I imagine he's widely available because he was on a bye and not many people had the luxury of stashing him. But keep in mind, guys, in week 6, we saw a shift in this Houston Texans backfield. It was the first week in which Devin Singletary took over, the RB1 duties in Houston. He had 34 snaps to Dameon Pierce's 21. He ran 18 routes to Damien's 7. He had 2 targets to Damien's 0. And when you look at the carries, Damien only had 1 more carry than Devin Singletary on the game. Singletary got 24 early down snaps compared to Damien's 16. He also dominated short yardage snaps and was used on third downs, which is something that we don't ever see with Dameon Pierce. Keep in mind, guys, that this team was just on a bye week, so maybe what they saw that worked in their last game, their win over the Saints, they want to implement a little bit more. It's just my opinion that there's a good chance that Devin Singletary might just fit this offense a little bit better. Maybe they don't need a bulldozer guy. Maybe they just need a guy who can be an efficient third down back, a guy who can, give you a satellite type option. So Devin Singletary could get more and more work if he's going to continue to be an efficient option for them. I think he's a cheaper option than the other 3 running backs I've talked about so far. I'm willing to spend about 10 to 15 to 20% of my fab, depends on how desperate you are. But I think you only will need to spend about 10% because this guy, not many people are really highlighting so far from what I've seen. All right, the 6th player that you should go and pick up, do you need a tight end? Well, then go grab Dalton Kincaid, available in 68% of ESPN leagues and 59% of sleeper leagues. Last week, he did not play due to the concussion. Now, in week 7 versus the Patriots, he had career highs in targets at 8, receptions at 8, receiving yards 75, and fantasy points at 15.5. He also had his second highest snap percentage of the year at 61%. He played 43 of 71 snaps, and he was a target that we know Josh Allen talked a lot about before the year. We haven't really seen him completely unleashed. This is the first game we have seen that happen. Now, we have had Dalton Kincaid, we've had Michael Mayer, we've had Luke Musgrave, Sam Laporta, a lot of rookie tight ends being relevant in their rookie year, which is super rare, but this is a very good class. So don't look at this as, okay, I found a weekly starter. You grab him and just wait for some consistency because there could be a potential Sam Laporta-esque breakout in the second half of the year for him. So I'm willing to spend about 10% of my fab. It depends on how desperate you are at that position. The number 7 pickup for me is going to be a wide receiver out of Green Bay. That is Jayden Reed, available in 82% of ESPN leagues and 75% of sleeper leagues. You can get this guy in most of your leagues. Last week in week 7, he had 3 receptions and a touchdown. Now, that touchdown that Jayden Reed had in that game was a complete fluke. This is not the reason I'm telling you to go out and pick up Jayden Reed. The reason I'm telling you to pick him up is because if you weren't watching that entire game, you may have missed Christian Watson going down with an injury. At the time of recording this, I do not know how serious that injury is. What I will say is when I watched that game, it looked like, at minimum, a multi-week absence for Christian Watson, if not something quite serious. I hope and I pray that that is not the case, that Watson is out there next week. But if you're watching this, and we know now, potentially, that Watson's going to miss an extended period of time, you got to go pick up Jayden Reed because he becomes a serious flex appeal player. And with the Packers already having their bye week, and with so many buys and injuries happening in the next couple weeks, you want to have Jayden Reed rostered as a potential flex option for you in your lineups. So I'm willing to spend about 10% of my fab on him, depending on how desperate you are. Let's say you need wide receiver, you miss out on Josh Downs. Consider Jayden Reed kind of that sneaky high IQ pickup that not many people are going to talk about. All right, the 8th priority for me, I'll get to that in 1 second. Can you do me a huge favor, guys? As you're watching the video, go ahead and smash that like button for me. You guys have been awesome this year. Thank you so much for 10,000 subscribers. We love you. We appreciate you. Do us a favor. Go ahead and hit that like button just to show some love. But the 8th pickup for me is another tight end, and it's risky, but we have to talk about it. We have to. We have to discuss Taysom Hill, tight end of the Saints. He's available in over 90% of ESPN leagues and 87% of sleeper leagues. This is back back-to-back weeks where Taysom Hill has over 12 PPR points. We can no longer just laugh at this production. Last week, Thursday Night Football, Taysom played 54 of 90 snaps, 60% of the time. He ran 44 routes. He had 5 targets, and he carried the ball 5 times. A tight end that touches the ball 10 times in a game is not something that we can laugh at. Again, back-to-back weeks, over 12 PPR points. And think about it. Where is this team really struggling? In the red zone. But for some reason, Taysom Hill seems to be the answer when they have no answer in the red zone, specifically on the goal line. So don't be surprised, if he steals maybe another touchdown or 2 from Alvin Kamara this year. If you need a tight end, I'm willing to spend about 10% of my fab. Keep in mind, I'm not sitting here saying he's a league-winning tight end, but with how difficult it is to roster one that you like, you might as well pick him up and play him in good matchups. All right, the 9th player that I think is worth looking at, if you miss out on Josh Downs, if you miss out on Jaden Reed, how about Kendrick Bourne, available in 78% of ESPN leagues and 61% of sleeper leagues. This week versus Buffalo, he caught 6 of 7 targets for 63 yards and a touchdown. Remember, in week 1 versus Philadelphia, he had a very good game, 24 points in that game. Now, if you look at this week, Kendrick Bourne played 57 of 60 snaps. Juju Smith was out with an injury. That is concerning to me. That could play a role if he's back. But he played 95% of the snaps. He ran the most routes of any player on this team, and he was targeted the most times of any player on this team as well. So if you're looking for, again, a wide receiver, maybe a potential flex in a deeper league, consider Kendrick Bourne a serious option if you need a immediate flex. Now, if you need something for the future, if you just want to add some, potential upside on your roster, someone that you're not going to necessarily roster this week, instead, go ahead and pick up his teammate, Demario Pop Douglas. This is a player that I've been talking about a lot on our stash videos. He's available in 98% of platforms everywhere. Definitely available in your league. 100%, I promise you. Go look. He's available in your league. Last week, he caught 4 of 6 targets for 54 yards, over 11 PPR points. That's the first time in his career that he had over that mark. And we know he ran 25 routes, which is the second most amongst the Patriots. He had the 3rd most targets, and he played the 2nd most snaps of any wide receiver. This guy, in my opinion, if you watch these games, he is the most exciting. He is the most explosive. He's the most dynamic playmaker that this team currently has. So you can pick this guy up for free if you have a free roster spot and see if this kind of work maybe continues as he gets more and more opportunities in his rookie season. And to finish off, I'll give you 2 honorable mentions. These guys should be considered in, much, much deeper leagues. That is Jalen Hyatt and Jake Bobo, 2 rookie wide receivers who are developing a role for themselves within their offenses. But that is it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Do me a massive favor. Go ahead and smash that like button. Let me know what you think in the comments below, who you're picking up, and we'll see you guys in the next video. All love. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, L-A-N-D, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.
It's so easy. Even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.